lot of truth in the statement that, a lot of people are trying to fill a God-sized hole in their heart with material possessions, whether that be business success or material things, like I said. So yeah, again, I feel very blessed that all of this came out of trying to serve first and trying to really just be transparent and vulnerable and give people a real view inside our actual life and how messy it was. And, the fact that we were in marriage ministry, really, if anything, we were in it because of the mess we had, and that's why God drew us into it. And I always said, we're up here talking to you guys, not as any kind of ideal couple. Like, we're here because we need it way more than you do. And the way God has chosen to help us is to have us go teach other people. And in that process, we kind of have to pay attention to our own household and what we're doing in our own relationships.
Our responsibility on earth is biblically undeniable. And what I mean by that is that I don't believe God just empowers us or influences us just to sit in a church somewhere trying to influence those that are already living a surrendered life. But ultimately, it's understanding that Great Commission, right, is to go into Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the world. So if he sent us into the world, when you go look at that word world, the world really translated is simple. It just means world systems. And that's what you're doing in business. That's what we do. That's what I do in business. I always just believe that business for me is just an extension of ministry. And ultimately, I think when God can trust us with larger platforms, you mentioned that word steward. Well, he can see that we're stewarding our current resources, managing our current resources, right on down to managing hardship and crisis and adversity. I think then God can trust us with higher levels of influence and bigger platforms. And I think it's when we reach those platforms that we can really be a megaphone on the behalf of advancing the kingdom.
My gift to the world is that I do create space for people to feel safe, and I create space for people to feel that they can show up as themselves. And where that comes from for me is connection. I value connection. I value trust and authenticity and integrity so much. And I really value inclusivity too. And it's because those three things I struggled having in my life growing up. And so if I can bring that to someone else, it's almost like I feel like when I'm performing, it's like prayer. I don't know if I think I've shared this with you. I found growing up, I would shut my door, close the lights, and just sing. And I wasn't performing for anybody, but I was performing, and it was because it was the thing that would make me feel most present to the moment. I could be so present to my power. I could be so present to God. I could be so present to good. And I didn't have any other way growing up to connect to that part of myself or to connect to that peace like we were talking about. And so now when I do that in front of people, I'm giving the same permission. I'm giving myself permission to be just so present. And that there's a vulnerability to that when people observe it, it almost gives them permission to also be that present.
Completely.
Who would they be if they knew who they are and who they were? And I would just, I would get so frustrated just watching them because they were so wise and I just wasn't saying that. And so I'm a little feisty. So I was like, you know what? Well, if they don't do anything with it, I'm going to take it and I'm going to do something with it and I'm going to break the generational cycle. And so what happened for me is I just started to just try on some things because I just knew I was called to entrepreneurship, but didn't really know what that was going to look like. I thought it would be an attorney because I'm like, I'm going to get my Uncle Steve out of jail. But that wasn't my calling when I got off into the field of the work. But there were some other things that was there. Once I got into that field, I started to notice that I was a great encourager. I noticed that people would pay attention to the advice I was giving. I was just giving advice. I thought I just was giving advice. And what I found is that advice, it became something that started to be real transformational to a lot of individuals. And so I just kept on following the path. So there were seeds deposited into me from my history with my family. I wanted something different. And I knew that I just knew it. I didn't know what to do with it, but I just knew it, that I was called to change it. And so that's how it started for me.
I would say we have pivotal moments in transformation.
And mine really comes from my story of becoming a heroin addict when I was 15. I was a homeless heroin addict from the time I was 15 till 20. And that was the life I was living until my boyfriend, who was my boyfriend that whole entire time, he passed away of an overdose when I was 20. And that moment really was death or change for me, because he was all that I had left, really. He was all that I had left. I hadn't talked to my family in years. I was homeless and really had no healthy relationships in my life. And so for me, at that moment, I really didn't want to live. And I had already tried to change so many times. But I told myself I was going to give it one more shot. I sold this car that we would sometimes sleep in because we had sold most of the parts off of it. And I was able to buy a one-way ticket to Hawaii from the sale of that. And I took what I had in a backpack and I hopped on a plane, and I told myself when I got off that plane, I would never use again. And, you know, I wish I could say that it was that easy. I can say that I have never used again since I got off that plane. But it was a very long journey of really just keeping one promise every single day. And that one promise was, if nothing else, if I did nothing else, it was just don't use.
Well, I'll be honest with you. The TED Talk thing wasn't exactly a decision as much as it was a calling from Mother Nature. So I've been doing these. I've been an entertainer for such a long time, and a lot of it was I was entertaining people, but was I really changing their lives? Was I really offering a value to their life? And other than entertainment, not really. And so I struggle with that. Like, do I have a purpose? Is there a point in doing any of this? Right? I feel like I wanted purpose in my life. And so in 2018, my family and neighborhood got destroyed with this tornado. It just kind of came out of nowhere and unexpectedly. Like, no one expects a tornado to come ripping up your driveway. I'm in the living room with the kids, and my neighbor's pool lands in the yard, which is a pretty good indication that I should put on some pants. And then panic sets in, and I grab my favorite kid, and we head down to the basement, and then the roof flies off, and the kid's swing set disappears. But they don't care because now they have a new pool.
You don't know what you don't know. And so over time, I've had to, again, that's what I spoke about earlier when I said becoming more Christ-like wasn't just a clothing issue. It was even how do you perceive other people who are not on that journey of faith, and having to not be judgmental and be like, why is she wearing that? And this, that, and the other. That I've had to also outgrow and learn the approach and the heart posture I'm supposed to have towards those that don't know any differently. And I think a lot of my kind of sharing and my platform, I kind of learned quite quickly that it wasn't for the world. I wasn't speaking to the world, and I wasn't speaking about a standard that the world knows about. And it's not really a standard for them. It was more a standard for the body of Christ. It was more of a standard and a call for those that have already said a yes to Christ, who have already surrendered, have already said, my life is not my own. So this topic of dressing for his glory is for us believers rather than saying it to the world. So for the world, I have compassion for them.
Amen. Yeah. A lot of times when I do, walk in the mall or the grocery store, and I walk up to somebody and I say, hey, guess what? And they say, what? And then I ask them, has anybody told you that they loved you yet today? And 90% of the people will say no. And then I say, well, hey, guess what? I love you. And I look them in the eye and I tell them, a lot of people start crying. And then many, many people, Tamra, will tell me, I don't feel like that's you telling me. I feel like that's God telling me.
Wow. I have full body chills.
That's it. Because that was the download. I didn't come up with this. Now, I've been saying, hey, guess what? I love you for 22 years because my oldest son is 22. And when the kids are in the car, I would always turn around and say, hey, guys, guess what? I love you. Right. So that's where that came from. But in those downloads of prayer and meditation and getting quiet so that I can receive, and I always do it from here. I don't know why, but it seems like God's downloads come.
Yeah.
It's this thing right here.
It's like a mind thing. I like it.
Yeah. But it's a mission. And you say, I took action. Well, I'm not so arrogant and I'm not so foolish to deny what God is telling me. Now, do I doubt it? Yeah. Is that my mind? Is that me? Okay. No, it's so prevalent. It's so prevalent that I know that it's God speaking to me.
What I typically call a financial crisis, because for me it was a crisis, and that was approximately 8 years ago, and found myself climbing out of that pit. And in doing all of that in conjunction with everything else I had going on. Oh, by the way, I also got my minister's license last January.
This is real life, you guys.
Sometimes I think, how did I do all this? Like, it really was only like God guiding me through all of it, to be honest with you. But through all of the healing and growth and overcoming, I developed this passion for helping others to either, more importantly, avoid going through what I've went through, or if they're in that place, understanding that they can come out of it and helping them climb out of it. Because I didn't necessarily go through it alone. I had people supporting me, but especially with the financial stuff, I didn't have anybody walking with me step by step, helping me to, like, teaching me the steps. I had to figure it out. And that was the hardest part, was figuring out, how do I do this thing? How do I put a budget together? How do I pay off my debt the right way? How do I keep motivated when things keep happening? That's the stuff that I developed a passion for, wanting to kind of to encourage and educate others on.
You have to inspire people like where they are. I think at the end of the day, you have to help people to remember. Often we forget like how many times he's brought us out of situations that we did not deserve to come out of, right? If he did it before, he could do it again, right? If we're still here, it's like, my team, I lead large sales teams, right? And, outbound specifically is a very difficult thing to do, outbound. But I say, if the customer's still on the line, they're waiting for the value.
So good.
You called me, you interrupted my day, right? If I don't dunk on you, if I don't hang up immediately, I'm waiting for you to tell me something good.
Come on.
Right? And so if you don't have it, get off the line. But we're still here because there's still something good, right? That God is trying to do. And if you could just remind people, right? If he did it before, he could do it again.
You have to have people who are going to show up, ultimately. If you're creating a mastermind and that one person or that other person or that nobody's ever together, you might not have strategized it well as far as what the mission is. Because if there is a common thread of mission, then those people are going to show up despite what their schedule is, despite what could come awry. Of course, people have situations that arise, but understanding that this is critical, this is important for everybody to thrive. Everybody has to show up in the fullness of who they are that day. The fullness of who they are that day doesn't mean that they're perfect, doesn't mean that their cup is full. It means that they're showing up on the days, even when they don't feel right, to be able to pour into the family, pour into the like hearts, pour into the like minds, and to be able to, maybe that's their time that they need to be poured into, which is such a gift. So understanding that that connection point will help you to help others thrive in that space.